Hello everyone, thank you for watching this video. This is going to be a data session, and in this session I am going to demonstrate more about Azure Active Directory and its capabilities and what are the operations we are going to perform on Azure Active Directory. And this is going to be one of the important topic, I would say, because before you enroll for any Azure subscriptions, we need to learn about this. This is the core component of any Microsoft online services, be it Office 365 or Azure subscription. So behind the scenes, Azure Ready plays a vital role. So it takes care of authentication, authorization of all cloud applications hosted in the Azure environment or in Microsoft tenant. So before we actually learn about Azure AD, let us try to understand what is an Active Directory and what are the operations we are going to perform on Active Directory and how Azure Active Directory is going to fulfill those requirements. So let me show you by taking you to another diagram, which basically demonstrate the on-premises infrastructure with the Active Directory and other applications configured. So assume that this is your on-premise infrastructure and with the various servers on it. And one of the server which is holding the Active Directory role, which we call it as a domain controller. So the Active Directory here in in the scenario will take care of authentication, authorization of our enterprise users and groups and any objects in the environment. So it takes care of all the all the activities. In case if any new joiner join any your organization, so you will have your system administrator who is going to provision user account and password in the Active Directory, and later uh, the user will be provisioned to access to various applications, could be applications which are integrated within your organization, or could be some server infrastructure which user need to have access. So let's say the user is from application team, he need to have access to the server to install the application or configure the application, probably debug the application, right? Probably the user who's just a user and he need to have access to the SaaS applications in your on-premise environment. So once their account is provisioned in Active Directory, your administrator will give them access to the applications or server infrastructure. So wherever is needed, they will be providing access to them. So in this case, the entire authentication authorization is managed by Active Directory. So since we are moving out of this environment and moving to the cloud, so how Azure AD is going to provide similar capabilities, how we create user accounts and how we create groups, what are the types of user accounts we have, and how we provide the permissions, what level of permissions we have is what we are going to discuss. Here, we just need to understand one thing. Active Directory we refer as AD hold the all users and computer objects and groups. So every identity that you create, it stores here in the Active Directory. All right, later we are giving them access to various resources. It could be servers, it could be applications within your organization, it could be applications outside of your organization. Users connect remotely through a VPN, users go to the corporate network and connect to the applications. End of the day, authentication is managed by Active Directory. Since cloud is being introduced, now Azure AD is going to play a major role. So how it is going to play a major role, we will learn now. So when you subscribe for any Microsoft online product, be it Azure subscription or be it Microsoft Office 365, any maybe it could be SharePoint Online, any Microsoft online service you're purchasing, behind the scene, Active Directory tenant is going to be Azure Active Directory tenant is going to be created. So once the Azure Active Directory tenant is created, it's your responsibility as a Azure admin or Azure Active Directory administrator. You are going to create users and provide them the required access. So as and when the users are growing, and if there are multiple users who need similar access, maybe you will create a group and add all those all those users to this group, so that so that all the users can be added to the group, and you can easily control their access. Whenever I say access, what access I'm referring in Azure AD, the access could be to the SaaS applications that are integrated with your Azure Active Directory, or it could be Microsoft online products such as Azure subscription, or Office 365, or SharePoint Online, or any other Microsoft online products. Which means, be it Azure subscription or Office 365 or SharePoint Online or Intune, they have the connectivity with your Azure Active Directory. So which means you create users here in Azure AD, and they can be granted access to a Azure subscription or a Office 365 or enterprise applications within Azure AD, or could be SharePoint Online or any Microsoft Online products, right? So they can be granted access to different platforms at Microsoft side. So now, how you provide access? You Are you going to provide access by user, or are you going to provide access by groups? It's all depends on the business requirement or the nature of the product that user is going to get access. Let's say there are a couple of users, maybe all the users within your organization, they need to access the Workday application, which is basically HR related applications, right? The users log into the Workday and download the pay slips, or check their offer rate, whatever it is. So the application is integrated with Azure AD, and the user should be having access to this application so that they can use their on-premises AD credentials, or the credentials that are created in the cloud, so they can access this application with those credentials. So which means, first of all, somebody has to integrate the application with Azure AD, and later, so you have to take a decision what all of the users should have access to this application. So you create all your 100 employees, and you can just create one group saying Workday group on Azure AD, and add all the users to that group, so that they can they can get access to all the users can be part of the group. And you can add this one group to you can add one group to the application. So you can add this group to this application so that all the users part of this group can access to this application. Okay, so that's how you perform access. So you create users, you create group, add users to the group, and later give access to the users or a group to the SaaS applications or Azure subscriptions or Office 365 or any Microsoft online products, right? And what kind of users you have it? You have cloud users, where you are going to create user account directly on the Azure Active Directory. And there is something called B2B or B2C users, where you are going to invite other organization users to access your directory data or applications which are integrated with your directory. And there is another type of user, which is on-premises AD user. Like I mentioned, you have your on-premises infrastructure, and you have your entire users and objects or groups information on the on-premises AD, and you want to give them access to the cloud applications so that they can use their on-premises user ID password to access the cloud applications. So they are called on-premises AD users, and that can be achieved by synchronizing these users and its objects to Azure Active Directory with the process called Azure AD AD to Azure AD synchronization using the Azure AD Connect. So be it any type of user, they will be part of a group, or they are like individual users. Later they can be granted access to any one of the Microsoft platform that we are referring here. Now, once you give access to the users, right, in a subscription level, or could be to SaaS application, what else an Azure administrator can do on Azure Active Directory? As we learn, he can create the users, groups, he can give access to the applications. And there is something called license. What is the license? By default, Azure AD come up with the free tier. So if you want to get additional features of Azure Active Directory, like if you want your users to reset their password by themselves, so they don't need to depending on you to reset the password if they forget any passwords. So self-service password reset, or any other capabilities like company branding, like when you log into any Azure online portals, you see Microsoft logo and Microsoft website information. If you want to have your own company logo, and if you want to have company information, then you need to work on your company branding. So in such scenarios, you need to have a license. So by default, Azure AD free tier will not give you such capabilities. Then you have to go for Azure AD Premium version 1 or Premium version 2. Or if you have Enterprise Mobility Suite plus Security file license purchase, then automatically Azure AD Premium P2 will be given to your directory. So such users, if you want to have a couple of users, set of users need to reset their password. For them, you need to have a license assigned. So you are going to buy your licenses, and later you are going to assign the licenses or remove the licenses, which is like removing access from the applications or groups, or from the licenses, resetting the password for a couple of users. These are the couple of features, a couple of operations you are going to perform if you are Azure administrator and responsible for managing Azure Ready. So sometimes you have to configure single sign-on for the applications. I was talking about the Workday application, which is integrated with your Azure Active Directory, and you might have to configure the single sign-on. So in such scenarios, you might be having a little bit knowledge of SSO single sign-on. Sometimes you might have to perform some audit. Let's say somebody perform an operation which causes a downtime, right? So you want to perform some audit. You go to the sign-in logs, access logs, and try to understand what changes happened and who made the changes. You might have to perform some root cause analysis for a couple of issues. And privileged identity management, we call it as a PIM. So Azure already has a couple of roles. Based on your role, your experience, you might be granted a role. But in case, assuming that you are getting a privileged role, which is, let's say, global administrator, and giving global administrator role all the time for one user or a couple of users is not best practice. So that is why we go with the PIM role, with the privileged entity management role. What happens is you activate this role when required. Let us say you got a ticket from help desk to create a user account and give them a privileged role access. Right. In such scenarios, what you need to do is you need to activate your role with the ticket reference and perform the task. And you can also specify how long this global admin role need to be activated. Let's say 4 hours or 8 hours or a day. But generally, if you're working on one or two tickets or one or two requests, so ideally it doesn't require more than 4 hours to 8 hours. So you select that and activate your role. So automatically your role will be a global administrator for the duration that you specify when you're activating the PIM role. So such kind of operations you are going to perform. And like I mentioned, when you activate the premium license for your Azure AD, and you will be able to configure the company branding and various other features of Azure Active Directory. And one of the features is like conditional access policy. So this is all for the security purpose. You want to restrict access for the users from a specific locations. Maybe you want to restrict access from a specific browser or applications. So such kind of policies you want to configure. You want to enforce multi-factor authentication for multiple users. So that's when you will start configuring these conditional access policies as part of your day-to-day responsibilities. As I said, we have different types of users. You have on-premise AD users. We synchronize them from on-prem AD to Azure Active Directory. So using a tool called Azure AD Connect. So you will be responsible for, synchronizing these user accounts from on-prem AD to Azure AD. In case if the synchronization is not happening, if a sync stuck somewhere, could be issue with the duplicate objects or duplicate entries. So you might see issues. You have to resolve those problems, and those kind of things you will be troubleshooting as part of your day-to-day operations. Similarly, you have to configure sometimes Intune device policies. Um, you know um, Users need to access specific applications from a specific device, or specific operating system. So such kind of things you are going to perform, and this is going to be your day-to-day operations. Couple of day-to-day operations in Azure Active Directory. And so most of the times, right, majority of the times, you will be working either creating users, groups, and providing them access to the various applications. That's one set of access. The other one is like, integrating applications, or, adding applications to Azure AD. Those are SaaS applications, and configuring single sign-on, managing the applications. So that's another role. And the third one I said, integrating on-prem to Azure AD using Azure AD Connect tool. That's a third one. And the fourth one, I would say security, right? Your account security, identity management security, like ensuring that only the authorized users are accessing the applications or Azure AD. By configuring PIM rules, and by performing the regular audits, validations, you are going to maintain that security is in place, not only authorized users are accessing the cloud platform. Those kind of things you are going to perform. Sometimes you might have to look at the secrets that are going to expire very soon for the application. So renew them in timely manner. It's renewing application secrets are like, very uh, easy task, but coordinating with the different teams like application team, database team, or various stakeholders, getting a downtime, updating the secrets, that's going to be a big task for you. But that's one of the role you are going to manage it. So Azure AD administration includes the creating and managing the users and groups, providing them access to the applications. The second role is to integrating the applications with Azure AD and configuring SSO if needed. And third one is synchronizing on-prem AD to Azure AD. And the fourth one is managing or introducing the Azure AD features. And fifth one is to ensure that the access part is controlled by conditional access policies or intune policies, those kind of things. So that's about Azure AD and its roles. And there could be sometimes you get a request to provide access to other online applications, I would say. So online services, one of them is Azure subscription. There could be one Office 365 as well, or M365 or a SharePoint Online. So to provide them access, the permissions are entirely different. You have a owner, contributor, reader, or a couple of built-in rules, couple of custom rules, what you have it, where you have to provide them in a management group level, or a subscription level, or resource groups level, or a specific resource level. These are the rules what you have it, but these roles are entirely different from what you see in the Azure Active Directory roles. Azure AD roles are tagged to the Azure AD administration that I was just referring few seconds ago. So they are related to this, but Azure subscription permissions are entirely different. So that the Azure permission subscription permissions are roles given or introduced to manage the Azure resources within the subscriptions, and within the resource groups and resources to the resources, but nothing to do with the Azure AD permissions. So sometimes you are a global administrator on Azure AD, which has like highest privileges in Azure AD, but you may not have owner access to or any access to subscription. So which means though you are a global admin here, if you don't have access to the subscription or any one of the resources, you can't manage the Azure environment. So though you are a global administrator here, if you have been granted as a reader access in a subscription level, you can only perform the read operations on the subscription and resource groups and resources, you cannot perform any other operations. So, and sometimes you might be just a user in Azure AD, but you are a owner on a subscription level, which means you can perform any operations on the subscription level, but you cannot perform any operations on the Azure AD level. So Azure admin or Azure subscription permissions and the roles and responsibilities are totally different from Azure AD roles and the permissions. Okay, so that's a difference that you will slowly or eventually understand. So in the upcoming video or the day 3 session, what we are going to do is we are going to discuss about Azure Active Directory and create users, create groups and provide them access to the applications and assign them licenses, resetting their passwords and synchronizing their on-premises AD users to Azure AD. So we are going to set up the on-premises Active Directory and we'll try to synchronize these users to Azure AD and perform these operations as much as possible to give you some high, uh, real-time experience on the Azure AD operations. All right, so once we learn Azure AD and its operations, then probably we will start with the Azure subscriptions. We'll try to learn what is this management group, what is subscription, what are the resource groups, and what are the resources means, and how do you get the subscription, what are the different types of subscriptions we have, and who can enroll for the subscriptions in the enterprise environment. So what are the considerations, we have to think before we enroll for the subscriptions. All right, and thank you so much for watching these videos, and please do comment if you have any questions, any queries. I'm happy to support you, and in case if you need Azure subscription access for the practice in future, please do ping me in the LinkedIn or ping in the comments so that I will be able to grant you access to the Azure subscription. Thank you once again for watching this video. Please do subscribe and comment and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.